I mean, it's a conversation at the end of the day, shifting the conversation around the South African cricket team and that narrative that exists.
These type of conversations are happening in casual commentary at braais at home with people that are just watching the game and those sort of things. And we're wanting to do nothing different than having that same sort of conversation, perhaps just lift the lid somewhat, lift the caliber of the conversation, because we've already peeked behind the curtains or under the covers, if you want to use that term, right?
As soon as you get clear on your motivations and your purpose and your intention, a lot of things can start falling into place.
Yeah.
A lot of things become automated. A lot of things all of a sudden goes, oh, okay, cool, that's how I'm going to do it. So the hows become very clear when the whys are clear.
These guys are hopeful that they're winners. They're not seeing themselves as winners entering it. Despite their having illustrious careers, it's a matter of coming together under the Proteas brand is where things come unstuck in a way.
So the identities of our local cricketing ecosystem has been completely eradicated at a provincial level. There is no longer that sort of, oh, I want to play for this team. Yeah.
It's like taking someone that's not familiar or not comfortable or used to being free and not shown how to handle that freedom. It's the same sort of analogy when we start talking about a playing philosophy of playing with freedom.
All exciting stuff that we're going to get into, right? All exciting stuff that we're going to get into. I'm already salivating a little bit. Right, Russ. The World Cup getting closer, and there's this backdrop of all the things that you and I've spoken about so far, right? So I just want to encourage people who haven't listened to our previous conversations to take the time to actually just go listen to them, right? Because I think a lot of what we'll speak about today and going forward will be textured, right, or have a color of those conversations. And there's certainly more of them coming, you know, those similar conversations where there's other voices that'll start joining us, etc. But so for the purpose of this champ chat between you and me today, what is sort of in the back of my mind is, and it comes from a couple of articles that we passed around between us. So one of the things I'm aware of is that the Proteas team, in 4 T20 series, they haven't won a series. In the past 11 games, they've only won 2 games under the current head coach, Rob Walter, with his support staff, which includes your good friend, JP Duminy. It includes a culture person and I'm not sure exactly what his title is, in Tom. It includes a fielding coach, I think, in Wandile. I'm not too sure if he's there. I haven't seen his face, but as far as I know, he's the fielding coach with a lot of energy. And so I can only imagine, with some of the things that has happened around the selection, etc., I can only imagine that there's enhanced pressures and challenges around this team in particular, you know. And so it can be said and it can be seen as, yes, there's change, right? Yes, there's a person with our capacity in that environment. Yes, there's fresh young blood from a coaching staff point of view. But the question has to then be asked, you know, in terms of this World Cup, what are our actual chances, you know? Because we're always going gung-ho, and it's been positioned along this idea that this is our best team. That's why we picked and selected in the way we selected, right? Is because this is our best chance to win this. You know, and I'm so just curious on where your head's at or what you think about that, because for me, I'm just playing these thoughts through my head. Like, what does it actually mean, and what is the effect on that environment?
Yeah. The major thing that comes up, particularly the way the pressures have mounted on, you know, from different angles, the different conversations that have been happening, even the media attention, as you highlighted, it's one that's very critical, and they scrutinize. They kind of put themselves that they need to win or they must win. It's almost like a non-negotiable at the moment, and that's even further pressure. It's almost like that phraseology that we used to hear from teams where they had this kind of, they postured in such a clever demeanor. This is my last game. Play it as if it's your last game, right? But with that type of approach, it often can be quite crippling, because if you're playing it as if your last game, you know there's no other option but to give it your best shot. But in their case, they've already added onto the cherry on the top that they must win their last game. So it's not just kind of their last game or that desperate or that emphasized. It's almost like a guaranteed win has to come from it. Otherwise, it feels like there's going to be additional pressure on them, heads or roll, or that sort of instruction that if you don't do it now, and then you're done for. So in the context of that backdrop, I think what's important is, you once asked me about the tag, how I would rephrase it. I think I would rephrase it now. And if I were in that space trying to assist, I would say the only real hope we have is that we actually use the tag and swap it around. Instead of calling it a choker, we need to be an overcomer, because the odds are stacked against you. You haven't really got a good record coming into this tournament. And there's not much faith in terms of whether the guys are able to do it, particularly with this whitewash/blackwash of the West Indies that's just been. So under those conditions, you may not actually be the best team. However, we have the sense of resilience as South Africans, which is always our go-to. We work hard, we kind of push back and all those sorts of things. But I think we have to nuance it with an overcomer type of embrace, spirit, energy. We have to see it as a positive. We have to come from a space of not feeling desperately to grab and to sustain the success, but more inspired to be an overcomer so that we can show others that we can put up a fight from an inspired space, from a positive energy in a way. And I think when we collectively do that well, we might surprise ourselves and others in the attempt of doing. But I think, as we said before, the siloed attempts at trying to be successful at this World Cup, it's not necessarily the best attempt here now, because collectively they've been labeled as chokers before. Collectively they've been labeled as up against it or whatever, or all these different things that come through. So I think they need to have a collective attempt at trying to do this overcomer tag in this World Cup. So that for me would be the best approach. And these are the type of things that would echo in different ways, different conversations, and even in physicality, in terms of attempts. When you go to the net, you're reinforcing through expression that you're an overcomer. So no matter what challenge you may face, circumstantially in the game, that's the thing that's driven through. We can actually see that personified through our screens.
Yeah, I like that idea. I'm sort of, as you were speaking there, I'm thinking, okay, hang on. A lot of these things that they're doing is in the name of 2027, I think. And I think you also have that awareness, and we've mentioned it before, that a lot of these things is done in the name of 2027. I think Russell was, not Russell. Oh, geez, the head coach, Rob. If you really read the article, he said, we've got to do more by 2027. Right? We're picking the best team now. Essentially, we're picking the best team now, which looks like this, right? Whatever that is. And I agree with what you say. Now this best team must go win it. It just adds to that pressure, and it adds to the dynamic within our country around the white, black colored thing, right? Because it's essentially saying, this is our best team, which looks like this. And because this is our best team, they have to win. So even if there is the plan for 2027, it brings into it this idea that we have to win now. Because plan 2027 could have said, we're taking a fully integrated team to this World Cup to give them the experience. So we're not expecting to win. We're expecting to go give this our best effort. We're expecting to go out there and perform to our best abilities. And we're going to make sure we prepare the team and the individuals to do that. And then based on that, after this World Cup, we'll go sit and unpack where we're falling short with the integrated team and identify the next 3-year process that we're going to put these players through so that we can win in 2027 at home, right? The 2027 home World Cup, I think it's a 50-over World Cup, though. I don't think it's T20.
Yeah.
So maybe that could be in the thinking that this is not the 50-over team, and so therefore we don't want to use this as part of that process. However, I think international experience in a pressurized environment, there's a lot to be said to giving players that experience so that they can have more experience or have an enhanced understanding of themselves, etc., come 2027.
Mm.
You know, that's the one thought that sits in my head. And the other is, coaches don't last, right? Coaches don't last. I think there's a thing going around in South Africa at times. Once you get hired, you're already fired. You know, you already got one foot out the door, because it's the nature of coaching. There's very few examples in the world, I think, of coaches who coach in one place for 10, 15, 20 years. But it doesn't really happen. You're normally in a place 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. If you've done really well, maybe 6 years in the cricketing landscape, and then you'll move on. Either the coach will seek the next opportunity, or the board has changed, or something has changed, right? And so I think part of the struggle that we have is that we always say, oh, next time. And next time's in 3 years' time. But in 3 years' time, there's new people that says next time, because I've got a long-term vision, I've got a long-term plan. And so I think if I was in the environment, in as much as I know it, in our conversations, in as much as it pains some things, I would most probably want to really, really zone in and focus on just this event, and what we can do, could do, and how we have to think and reframe it along that sort of facilitation style that when I asked you that very pointed question in one of our conversations, and you neatly alluded it by sort of saying exactly what we'll do along that sort of facilitation style, facilitate the team to an understanding of, what is it in this World Cup with this focus, with these pressures that we could experience, and sort of just highlight all of that, right?
Yeah.
With these pressures, right? Where do we move to from there? Yeah, and most probably then have some reframe, as you suggest, around some of the thoughts and ideas that, that get raised. Are these the best ways that we could think about, talk about, approach, feel as a team about these things in this tournament,
Yeah, there are added concerns as well, where for me, in terms of, people often speak about the 2027 as a focus, but then you go through a World Cup which has just been in India, and now another one in T20, and I know it's different, slightly different formats, but it's still white ball, right? And it's still that sense of representation and not winning another ICC event type of thing. Because if we win an ICC event, in this case with the T20, we're not going to feel the same choker tag in 2027, because it's a 50-over format and it's different. It's going to be almost a dismantling of that mentality, right? We would have shaken it off somehow. So if we're saying that we've taken the best team to this event now, the best team we could have chosen, even if it's not representative as we unpacked, then this team now, which is the best team, needs to put its best foot forward and actually do the best they can and potentially try and win it. But they need to be real about what they're going into. And they can't come with this cop-out attempt at saying, no, we're learning for 2027. I think you need to practice and try and get it right now where you are. Because as you said, coaches can be hired and fired almost instantaneously. And I don't think it should be a matter of, I look at, Sunrisers, for instance, as an example. There was an article where they've swapped coaches and captains every single year for 3 years in a row. It's that cutthroat, if you want to call it that, right? It's a high stakes space. So if we're going to lower the standard and say, no, you have a leeway of 4 years and work out, I think that in itself is a little bit of a cop-out and a waste of time. Because if you have the goods, you can have the goods right now and kind of show glimpses of that. You don't have to wait till 2027, because you're wasting everyone's time in the process, right? So I really think that the pressure of, you embrace it and you take it head on, you take this thing and you face it. The elephant in the room is, you've got this hurdle now. Can you get over this hurdle and win it? And I've spoken to, the coach in this regard, and he actually referred to maybe, the thinking was very subpar in a way, or substandard actually. Perhaps we can fluke this tournament. I'm talking about the Indian thing now, right? Perhaps you can fluke it and win it. I mean, why do you have to fluke it? You can actually prepare well enough, and we're good enough cricketers to actually win it. Why do we have to fluke it like a blind squirrel that comes across a nut? Why you consider yourself to be that type of blind squirrel? If you're clever enough or wide awake enough, you can actually do it. So I look at this whole thing about learnings and stuff like that, and giving you, and all teams go through these phases of rebuilding and whatever, but there are quality cricketers that are coming straight from an IPL now, coming into that team to reinforce that team, despite the, call it, say, B team being so poor. They can take the best on in the world and win it if they were wide awake and a sense of awareness is there. So we should be saying, let's lift the standards and let's hit the mark and let's try and guarantee to bring it back. Then maybe when we fall short, then we can deal with the learnings, not going into it and saying, okay, guys, whatever learnings we can take from this, hopefully it's going to be capacitating enough so we can target for 2027. I think that is actually it's actually not very conducive to getting the best out of yourself. So I'll use an example that I've personally experienced, and I don't think you'll mind the reference here, because I'll say it to you in firsthand because you need to understand the context. So Ashwell Prince was let out of the team, and I think it was out of injury, and didn't find his way back because JP Duminy replaced him. You remember the
Yeah,
I
remember that. I remember that, yeah.
And then JP started doing extremely well on that tour and started making a name for himself in the test arena. So Ashwell somewhat couldn't find his way back. Seemingly that was the narrative that was floating about, which was a little bit of a question mark around it because they could have both played in the team. Why did they have to replace each other, right? As an example. But essentially what then eventually came about was Ashwell was given an opportunity to come back in the team in a South African series against the Australians. And he was only given the opening. He had to open, right? Because there was an injury to the opening batter. I'm not sure who it was. I think it was McKenzie or something. And as a result of it, at that time he was still playing for the Warriors, so I was engaging with him. And so the mentality is you're being thrown in at the deep end here because he's not an opening batter, right? And you're going to be exposed, and this is your only way to actually be of service to the country, to really, So this is the tough scenario he was given because he knew that the manner in which he was entering the team wasn't genuine. Number one, the reasoning for bringing him back in and the way they offered it to him, it felt like it was a setup for him to fail, right? That's just the transparency of it. And the result of it, all that pressure, he still needed to be able to say yay or nay on the decision to go, which he accepted. And when he went into the game, I think he scored 150 or something like that in a test match. But he batted and opened the innings, and he actually proved them wrong at Centurion, right? So that there clearly indicates that an unfair situation or a mountain to climb actually drew the best out of an individual. And if we can do that for one individual with a certain spirit and a certain mentality and an approach to it, then why can't it do it for the collective? Why do we have to delay excellence or a great performance on the basis of things being sweet, like everything is in order and everything is actually cherry-picked and ordered for you? This red carpet type of thing for you to actually go and shine. I think the overcomer tag suits that because now all the things, the odds are stacked against you and things are actually going weighted against, this dark backdrop. So now the star can come through. Like if you look at the metaphor of the night sky, the star can shine, right? And I think that's what these guys are going to do. They're going to do us a disservice if they just go and say, oh, let's just go compete and let's just see where we come, how far we can come. And I think that will be more disappointing than anything else.
Yeah, I agree. And I think you say a lot of what I was thinking much better when I was alluding sort of to treating it in isolation, that idea, not being insensitive to the past. That was a lot of what you say sort of fitted into my thinking about it, right? So for me, I think something we misunderstand as South Africans, right? And I think of I've been very involved in our coach education system for 13 years, presenting at level 1s and 2s to more recently presenting at the level 3 and 4 for the last 3 or 4 years. And one of the things is we have a big drive to learning in South Africa, right? We have a massive, in our coach education system, it's all about creating learning environments, and it's about ensuring coaches get taught strategies on how to ensure that learning is happening. And that's all fair and good, right? I'm not saying that that's bad. I'm not saying that that's wrong, because it does lead to more of a softer approach in that the whole purpose of that is to overcome the idea of the authoritarian coach, the one that stands and tells and dictates and screams and shouts, right? And so it is a concerted effort and a move to be more player-centered, as the language is spoken about, right? Where I think we get it wrong, and which I think you sort of allude to, and which I'm trying to allude to a little bit too, is that performance is a sharp edge, right? It's not learning. Learning is going into an unknown space and being sort of okay with an unknown thing, and being okay with the discomfort that comes with learning, because learning is a little bit uncomfortable, versus performing, which is the performing of the known. I know I can. And so I think we at times struggle to make that distinction. And for me, I've made it very clearly, because I feel like I have an understanding of performance, that performance isn't something that comes from a learning mindset, a learning approach, right? Learning says I'm open, I can be uncomfortable, and I will go sit down and reflect. Where performance is not that. Performance is a sharp edge. It's an in the moment. Learning often happens in sleep, right? You learn, you go through the experience, then your mind and your body integrates it tonight when you sleep. Where performance happens now, it's in the moment, right? So there's so many different distinctions between learning and performance. There's probably a whole bunch that I'm not even mentioning. And so I get the sense of, sort of along similar lines, that if we're going to approach it as a learning experience, there won't be performance, because learning and performance cannot happen at the same time. We're either learning, which is great, that you do before a tournament, that you do in winter, that you do maybe in a session somewhere, you change something a little bit and you're busy learning. But if you get into performance, it's about applying the learnings. It's about doing the known. It's about understanding yourself. It's about understanding your game. It's about being able to regulate, say, your emotions and your state and your thinking in the moment as the chaos of a cricket game unfolds, with all the pressures, the spectators, the noise, the expectations, the stories, the narratives, all the host of things that could affect you mentally. In the moment of performance, you're able to execute the known. You're able to execute the things you know and understand about yourself, your skills, your abilities, your talents, etc. And I think that's something we miss if we just keep talking this learning language, right? And the learning language lives and breathes in South African cricket. It really does. It's an undercurrent. And so when we get into performance, it's easy to make it about, we'll just learn for the next thing, rather than we yet to win this thing. And what's it actually going to take, right? What is it actually going to require of us to do and to step into? And if it means we take on a different persona, well, then maybe for the next, because we got to somehow shift this narrative, right? We got to shift the narrative that we can go into a tournament and win it. I don't want to say I hope that we don't win it. I still believe that that somewhere some tournament must be won, so that we can literally just shift the narrative, right? So that we can start telling a different story, which I think will start leading to a whole bunch of stuff. However, I appreciate where you come from, that we've got to win it in the right spirit, because then it will be so much more powerful, right? If we just win it and it's like an empty win, it's great because it will start changing the narrative, but it won't be as effective. It won't be as worthy. The story will be a little bit hollow, but at least we can tell a different story, right? I think that's where I find myself a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, and also the concept, as you're saying about learning, if you drop the L of learn, it's earn. So firstly, when these guys got selected, they've earned the right to represent the country and represent us all when they go and bid at this World Cup. So that is the first win that they've accomplished. But if you think about it in a tangible way, they've now earned the right to go and do what they know themselves to be, which is these pro cricketers. And pro cricketers is not development. Pro cricketers, high stakes, high performing environment. They need to be about the business aspect. So which means we've kind of softened it up by speaking about this mental stuff all the way, and the support, psychological support or environmental support, and all the backdrop, trying to make it actually better for these guys to perform, right? All the things that are against them. However, the demands on them, they get paid high salaries, they get remunerated, they're going to benefit from an ICC event, which is even an inflated amount of money that's coming their way. Can you walk worthy of that earning that you're going to be having, right? It's a space where you're going to demonstrate that you need to be at that level. That's the first thing that needs to be acknowledged. The fact that you're not just coming into an environment where, it's cushy and you can just kind of just make mistakes willy-nilly. This is it's a space where we recognize you're a person of high caliber and produce high results. So that's the distinction. It's the same thing that cricketers will say, no, this is not just any cricket match, this is a test match now. So a 4-day first-class game is different from a test match. you carry yourself differently. So similarly, this is not another series, a T20 series. This is now, it's not even the IPL, this is the World Cup. So it's a staged event of that caliber, that height. You understand? So it's not a domestic level or series or anything. It's world stage event. So you really need to be able to say, am I worthy to compete at this level? Which I believe there are enough guys there. But collectively as a team, we need to earn the right to be there and walk worthy of the salaries that we're being remunerated. So people on the other end, like we stand back and we watch this and we say, if a doctor's earning X amount or any professional, they need to work worthy of that salaries that they, demanding, if you want to call it that, right? That they said, this is what it is. I've taken enough time to investigate this. I can be an answer here. So similarly, these crickets to say, I'm an answer for this event. How well you remunerate me or how well I represent you is what I need to go do and put on a show there, really demonstrate that I'm working worthy of you in the faith in me, as well as the reciprocation that's coming my way. So if we do that for other industries, why don't we do it for our cricketers as well? It's the same sort of thing. These guys don't do other jobs. This is their profession. They do this day in, day out.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm reminded of a story. I was at a coach acceleration program camp this was a whole bunch of, I think the IPL, it was the second edition of the IPL got played in South Africa, right? It was the second or the third edition got played in South Africa. The second edition got played in South Africa, right? That's how far back this goes. I was at a coach acceleration program, a cap camp for coaches at the Cricket South Africa head offices at Tuks in Pretoria. And we Anton Ferreira organized us, who was sort of the head of the program, the coach education manager at the time. He organized for us to go watch one of the IPL games, and it was Chennai versus, I can't remember who. And I'll never forget, like it's this memory sits in my mind, right? And it alludes to exactly what you're talking to. He said, before the first ball got bowled, Chennai was fielding. I can't remember who the bowler was. I have a rough idea what his name is, but I'm going to not pronounce it right, or I'm going to mess it up beautifully. So I'm most probably not say it, but I'll be able to find him if need be. And he said, watch this bowler. He's being paid millions. He's going to run up, bowl the first ball down leg wide. And true's pop, it played out exactly like that. Here's this guy running up first ball down leg wide. And it's sort of, because it was about exactly that, right? You're being paid to be exceptional, right? You're earning top dollar, right? Essentially, and you come and you run up and you bowl first ball down leg wide, where that is your skill set. That's why you're in this team, is to run up and bowl the first ball top of off stump or whatever that ball is. It's definitely not to run up and bowl the first one down leg. And so I think we don't want to, I mean, for me personally, I don't always want to make it about money, right? I don't want to make it about that. But at the end of the day, it is such a big player in this landscape, right? Players quit international cricket. They quit the loyalty of their country to go play in these tournaments around the world. Why? Because I've got to make money. And so I don't know if it's the most efficient driver of performance, to think of it in that way. But I certainly think it's a big pressure in performance that, you tour India, a lot of players will say, if there's a T20 series in South Africa, we pick a bunch of youngsters. Certainly, I know that players would think, if I do well, I might get an IPL gig. Certainly that would motivate them, right? And so if that can motivate you to enhance and step up your game, well, then certainly we could use it potentially to say, well, you are being paid that. So there's an opportunity for you to show, that you are worth that, Yeah.
I think that the two drives is articulated beautifully from Daniel Pink in his motivation. So he talks about motivation 3.0. And in there, he talks about amping up your motivation, which is intrinsic motivation, as opposed to anything external. And I think what you're referring to there is like a carrot stick, our normal process of the lure of the IPL, or if I don't do this, I lose out on actually earning anything from the game, right? So that carrot stick is not strong enough. It's the money is not enough. But maybe if you lift the standard and intrinsic motivation, which simply means if you lift the standard of where you're targeting, I'll draw it back to South Africa in a sense. Like South Africans shouldn't be necessarily, as youngsters also coming up, they shouldn't necessarily target, and at the moment, the money spinning is the IPL or those leagues, right? They shouldn't be setting that as the benchmark standard to get in. To compete. Like, how is South Africa currently going to keep Quinton de Kock from going to the IPL? And which is, they haven't, obviously, he's just left and decided, no, I'd rather go on the circuits for the remainder of his playing career. Or anyone else. What if it's Rabada that leaves tomorrow, as an example, right? How are we going to pay them well enough to sustain this? It's not about the money necessarily. If you live and you allow certain intrinsic motivations to be hit, not the carrot stick, not the money, and you hit those sweet spots, right? Players then decide to make a decision to be a part of a brand image or an association, a value-based structure that speaks to them on a personal. There's a aligned sense of self-interest with the corporate interest of the entity that they want to play for. Now the intrinsic motivation is deepened, and therefore the standard is also lifted because they're trying to hit and meet that higher standard. So it's not necessarily, so for instance, if you're competing, you can't compete rand for rand or dollar for dollar against the IPL or any of these leagues. So what do you have to do? And this is what I told the captain at the time, by the way. We had a conversation over this at breakfast. You need to make the space so inviting that people want to spend their time here with you in your team, as opposed to sitting on the bench at an IPL, like a Glenn Phillips or whoever, just because for three months or 2.5 months, they're coining it, and they don't have to work for the rest of the year if they don't want to, as an example. But they don't have to do that. They choose rather to play for a team, a lower team, because it's more meaningful, more motivating from an intrinsic point of view. And it's a sweet spot, common ground and alignment. So South Africa doesn't have that. We're trying to compete and trying to find our way. And the guys are not overly excited to put their hands up and say, I want to represent the badge. The badge is most important. But what does the badge actually mean currently? Does it really want me to aspire me to say no to everyone else? The Riley Rousseau is going overseas and then decide, oh no, that's not working out for me. Let me come back and represent. What is it really driving you here? Then they go on the circuits. I'm just mentioning names because it's been a recurring thing that's happened. So when these guys come from the IPL now, how motivated are they to play for that badge? And are they actually doing it in such a way that it's lifting the standard of the badge or the brand that they represent? Or is it actually to position themselves personally for the next round of IPL selection or whoever's next? I think it's the MLC or the CPL or the Big Bash or whatever. You see, so just look how well South Africa plays against England, against India when they were here just prior to the what's this thing called, the selections, the auctions. So those are the things. Those are the things that we need to get right, to say, if we don't inspire these guys genuinely, that our home space is more of a delight to be a part of, for these reasons, right? Then they're going to go and say, no, I'm going to go run after the shallow nature of my cash cow or whatever, and look only after myself, and abandon the bigger cause because the cause is not really, it's not really pulling me.
I love everything you said there. I love everything you said there. The way it's like I almost want to say like the start of a team workshop jumped into my head here, right? So the thinking I sort of ran with there is like connecting the whys. So I think it's Simon Sinek who did the start with why. No, it's not him.
Yeah,
is it him?
It is him.
Start with why, right? And so here's the thing, right? I'm aware that in that space, that was what Protea Fire was meant to be, right? To give a why, to give a meaning, to give a purpose to the Proteas.
Yeah.
And hey, I think the Proteas Fire, and as much as I have resistance to it, it was successful to an extent, right? We were the #1 test team in the world. We went into tournaments, world tournaments, as the #1 team, ranked #1 before World Cups. That happened, right? On the back of Protea Fire. So there was a meaningfulness in the environment at that point in time. I think it fell short because of, as I said before, because it was built around the idea of rebirth, not around the idea of say excellence in some other form that would allow us to go in tournaments, that we don't have to feel like we need our backs against the wall before we can show ourselves, right? We can show ourselves because of who we are. An idea around that a bit more. But it's sort of this idea for me, what you spoke about there was connecting the whys. So we've got to have that clear purpose, that clear intention. And I think if it's built along the lines that you refer to, more a spirited approach, right? And an understanding, and the things that we spoke about before. And we can solidify an understanding around the Proteas that goes beyond a coach, that goes beyond a mental performance coach, that goes beyond the current staff that's in the environment, right? The Australian baggy green means way more than the current head coach or the current players. It transcends, right? And I don't think we've found this transcending ideas around the Proteas yet, because it goes on the whims of the staff that's around. You know, nobody's come along and actually said or created something that goes beyond the individuals. And I think that would be core to try and identify. And then CSA would need to play a big part in, say, something like that, in terms of spreading that message, right? Spreading that language through the country, not just the next marketing campaign for that's our team, or what all these little slogans are that they come up with, because it's just some marketing agenda for this season, you know? No, it's got to be something that's then, as we've been speaking, like built and plugged into the core identity of everything we are and do as South Africans, right? And then once you have that, you can connect the whys. Then you can do what you're alluding to, saying, okay, well, how does my personal agenda fit into that? What about my why can I connect with this? Because then I think you can start having that space that people would want to be part of, right? Because this idea of the Proteas is so inspiring. It is so, I mean, I've got goosebumps thinking about the idea of having something that you want to be part of to that extent. Like, I want to be there because it means I'm connected to this thing.
Yeah.
You know? And so, like, personally, I'm sitting and I'm going like, wow, I'd want to be part of trying to figure that out in some way. You know, I'd want to be part of, like, that's the type of stuff that gets my blood flowing as an individual, is to be able to know that I've played a part, say, in identifying what that thing could be, you know? Yeah.
It's often referred to as a binder, like it kind of binds everyone together because it's something that everyone can resonate with. One thing that you mentioned there, it's in the same vein of what you're saying. When you think about Protea Fire and the kind of intentionality behind it, the conception of it was this whole rebirthing thing. But with any rebirth, right, it's in the name. Means again, and birth, right? You know what birthing means, which simply means there must have been, with when you join the two, rebirth, which means there must have been a death of something. So something has to have died.
Yeah.
So we haven't defined what's dying in South African Protea Fire. And it's meant to be that choker. That choker needs to die. We need to strangle him to death.
Yeah, we need to strangle him to death. Yes,
it's got to go. And then we can rebirth.
Then it's got to become a distant memory. Distant memory.
So that's just the one little thing that came out for me as you were speaking. So I just jotted it down, and that's some things that you were talking about that get you energy going, and energizes you, right? Because that's the binder that we can really all resonate with. If we were to encapsulate it well, where people can really easily connect, and then it becomes no, I prefer to play for you versus the other team, right? Because this is where I find meaning, I find a community, I find collaboration, but genuineness of it all, right? So this is the key. The key, and I know that it's a renowned literature because it's been out and a lot of people are trumpeting it, right? Start with why, Simon Sinek, the whole why, what, how, that whole circle. I'm not going to elaborate on that. We know what that's about. However, it's not actually the why, in our case, in terms of how we evolve. It's the who. Who are we doing it for? That matters right now. Because we are abandoning certain individuals, certain brand for some others, for our own interests. So our why is strong individually, and that's that free agency thing. Our whys are
Yeah.
strong, but we're not finding the who to click with our whys.
Mm.
And that's the key. So we kind of need to understand whatever we're attempting to do, whatever you do in your life, who are you doing it for mostly? It's going to benefit your kids and your family, right? Your wife and your kids and whatever. That's going to be probably your who, your driver. So similarly, when you come into a corporate space or into a team space, who are the people that you would like to be aligned with? Who would you like to spend your days with, going into battle, fighting for a particular cause, a meaningful reason for being? A day-to-day where you get up and energize. I want to spend my time maximizing my capabilities and my standards, getting rewarded for it. That's one thing. But also with who am I spending that time with? So I know what I want to do, why I want to do something, but with who. And I think we don't define that well enough. In actual fact, we create silos and divide, and we start saying, no, we can't go to this World Cup without him. You know what I mean? Because that's the essence. We need to understand, do they carry the right beat? So if we look at that concept of who, and we start looking inside that team space, who is there that kind of should be there, who carries the spirit of what we really want, that high standard, almost like the excellent standard, exceptional standard, as you said it earlier, that really deserves to be there? Or are we selecting those individuals based on what? Our budgets. We only have restricted budgets, so who can we take? We're showing a little bit proficiency, so let's snap him up. You can become the analyst, you become the physio, you become whatever. We need certain representation in the optics. You become this, you become. But is it the highest standard that we are getting? Are you going to be adding that standard collectively to each other? And then when you get your players the same way, not just statistically who is the best wicket keeper, who's the best fit for this team, not who's the top talent, who's the best fit for that standard that we're setting.
Yeah. Yeah. I had a thought that disappeared. The who, right? That was my thought. So I think we've mentioned a couple of times on this thing, where you spend your money, that's how you'll know what's important to you. I think if you think of the idea in a similar way, then it's who do you want to spend your time with indicates where your importance is for you, right? So if I say my family is important to me, but I choose to spend more time at work, well, then what's really important to me? Like, where am I choosing? Where and who am I spending my time?
Yeah.
And so to connect sort of a dot from earlier in this conversation, if I'm more interested in spending my time at the IPL and at the Big Bash League and at the SA20 and at the CPL, if I'm more interested in spending my time there and with people that are there, the who's, right? I'm more interested in connecting on WhatsApp as a cricketer with the guy in Australia or this, then what does that say, right? And I mean, yeah, I can't speak for players, right? But I am curiously wondering by myself, are these cricketers that are in our national setup, is the who's that they want to spend their time with their fellow teammates around the ideas of Proteas and how we achieve success and how we don't? Or is it more important to go to the IPL, earn my dollars, come back home, spend my time with my family because I don't get to see them much, and then when it comes to time for Proteas, well, I'll put that jersey on and go do my best. Like, I don't know, right? That's sort of thinking I have based on what you said there. And so that's a curiosity, right? That's a curiosity I have, because if it is a case of so this idea then of I'll quit Proteas, I'll only make myself available for T20s so that I can cash in. I think that to me says where maybe we can read a little bit into that to say, okay, well, where maybe you're not for the Proteas. Why are you not, as a cricketer, potentially rather saying, I will see out my Protea career. I might become a bit more selective in terms of managing my energy, right? So that I can be optimal for the Proteas. However, I've also got to take care of the finances. So I commit to maybe playing the IPL and SA20, but beyond that, my commitment's to the Proteas. and I want to finish off playing a test series for my country or playing in my final ODI series as a national treasure, having won things, having added value into the system, having taken that transcended idea to the next level, that's what I really want to achieve with my career. However, I'll also cash in on the things that I'm fortunate and blessed and privileged enough to cash in on. I think that alludes maybe more to the type of cricketer we're speaking about versus a cricketer who's more about it for the money and putting on the Proteas jersey just because, whatever, I have to do that so that I can get these other things.
Yeah, I think we also need to be cognizant of the fact that it can't be a blanket scenario of how we address everyone, right? So there has to be
definitely.
So when it comes to, for instance, the mentality or the approach from CSA, so I'll share a little bit of the specifics here. But if you're coming from the old mindset of being in charge and wanting control, remember that is kind of almost dismantled already or being dismantled. The free agency, particularly for the top players, already kind of happening for them. They decided, if you push me in the wrong way, I'm out. I'm going to either county or I'm going overseas, going on the circuits, whatever, right? They can threaten at any point. So there's no real clout that CSA really has with any of these players, particularly if you have established name already. So you really need to treat these guys differently from the other guys, as an example. When I say treat them differently, I mean you meet them where they are, right? But you treat adults like adults and you have mature conversations. You don't necessarily have to be controlling or in charge of them. You just be, come to a kind of social contract, right? Where you negotiate the terms and conditions where they are. The key around that is to basically say, because of their maturation where they are individually, you can basically suggest that there's certain things that you can do and you need to find out individually that you'd like to go and explore these overseas gigs and see what it's like. I know firsthand players going into those leagues actually can possibly lose themselves because there's no sense of meaning. They came from a high meaningful space of under Protea fire as an example. Then they land up in these gigs and they lose themselves, like literally lose themselves. Bad habits, destructive behavior. So they kind of just lost their way. But they sustain it because that's the thing, that's the only way. It comes with a whole bunch of, there's a price for every pleasure. Let me put it that way, right? But you can do that and you can look after the individual and the cricketer as CSA and say to them, go and explore. We release you like a mature father or motherhood, release you to the world. And we know that we got good enough. We work on what's happening at home because eventually you'll find your way home because it's so solid here that it will look inviting for you to return home. Right? If we can do that as CSA, release them with our blessing, so to speak, and then allow them to come back instead of holding them ransom with a contract. No, you contracted to us, so we can't give you an NOC to go. No, let's have the mature conversation and let's do this maturely and release you, and let's have a personal conversation. So then we start working on this maturation of the player as well as the organization, because the organization can't antagonize the player too, because they also have their part to play. They must create an environment of accommodating, of support, of love, of enduring, of excellence, of exceptionalness, right? And a space where people feel they want to be a part of. That's the number one thing. I want to come back home, right? That's their part. So if you have that sort of thing, then we're having mature conversations because we can use these leagues to sharpen our players. As if you go to the IPL, you're going to have certain exposure there that's going to benefit when you come into a World Cup now. But we're not doing it intentionally, so we're missing out on that. Because you're going there purely to benefit yourself, and then we hope there's enough reserves for you to take on this challenge collectively. And that's what's happening now. Whereas what's happening with the IPL guys, you're not playing anywhere else. We're just keeping you here. We're keeping you energized so that you can represent India as an example. And that's your main thing to do, right? I need to get and represent India. And we're not utilizing the landscape carefully enough. So that's the opportunity that is there for us, to really capitalize on, and I say capitalize the wrong word probably, to kind of build on. It can benefit us. It could be that silver lining that could aid us, so that when you do go, we're not saying you mustn't go into the world and go and see it, but just see with open eyes what's to benefit and what's to disadvantage. And then you come back with that lessons, right? And you benefit us all when you do come. Then we're
Yeah.
having this open, transparent conversation, mature conversation. And then we can say, yes, we found our way to each other relationally. And on these terms, you bring this energy back. And this is why we enhance holistically, call it as a family or as a
Mm.
bigger community.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. Definitely. Russell, if you were in that space right now, what would you sort of be thinking about doing with the team? Everything we've discussed here today, and maybe say before, as we build into next week. I think, is it Monday?
Monday, 3rd. Yes.
Yeah. As we build into the 3rd, right? Well, what would you be busy with? What conversations would you be encouraging? Yeah. Where would your head be at in terms of where the team needs to go to be ready for the 3rd? I mean, if you look at the teams we're playing against, I don't think our group stage, or I think the anticipation might be that the group stages might be a little bit might be easy. You know, Sri Lanka, Netherlands. I'm not too sure who the other team is. In this very moment, I keep forgetting who they are. Although I see Netherlands have beaten Sri Lanka in the warm-up game. I don't know where South Africa's warm-up game's gone. It doesn't look like it happened yesterday. You know, so we don't necessarily know what the reasons around that is, whether it's the opposition or whether it's internally South Africa deciding that they don't want to because they've had these other 3 games and what they're busy with. But I'm just curious, like, where would your head be in terms of what needs to happen, right? Yeah.
Yeah, in particular, just after because there was like a moment where we lost the series against West Indies, right? In going over there. And a little dead time or preparation time before the World Cup now with this warm-up matches. And the IPL guys would have joined post the IPL final. From that moment when we lost and these guys are joining, out of the attempted to try and do like a complete reset, basically like a detox. If you think about a detoxing and wiping the canvas clean and allowing this overcomer tag, as I said, to become resonant within that group. So firstly, let's find a way to completely shift from where we've come from, our different sectors, whether you're in that series or where you come from the IPL, or whether you were in South Africa and you're just joining up, whatever, wherever you're coming from and we're coming together, let's press the reset and let's find a way to kind of detox and then find our way to each other first, and then cast this vision of what the challenges are going to be on the, discuss it openly, share transparently where some reservations might be from the floor, from players. And then not just the reservations, but the plans to overcome those reservations. Right? Not just this big mountain, but how we actually physically and strategically do this. And what type of mentality and energy do we have to hit those goals, to actually make it work? So you have roughly about 7 days, and you can formulate a scope within that 7 days to do that. I would actually park, for me personally, I would suggest having parked a lot of the training and the ball hitting at this point in time, because the problem doesn't necessarily lie there. These guys are highly skilled. They've been playing. They even played of the series now. So I wouldn't play a lot of warm-up games. Neither would I have been much at the nets. Only for those who are so inclined, want to go hit it out and find their way, the doers, if you want to call it that, right?
Yeah.
But I would leave it almost half optional. There's an optional nets type of thing, but conversations need to be had left, right, and center so they can get into that, what you called that state, that performance state, where they can go accomplish what they need to accomplish, because not just of their whys, but because of who they play for.
Yeah. And I think for me, what I would agree with everything there. I think what I would maybe just add on there is I think the closer you get a bit into the what's in the house, right? So you make it a little bit more behavioral specific. Like if we have this vision, and if we're saying who this is for, and we are clear on that, what is it that we could potentially then achieve? No matter what's just happened in this West Indies series, no matter what's happened over the past 4 series, no matter like, what do we realistically believe? If we can tap into that energy, right? If we can tap into that energy and we can buy into an idea of doing things together, or whatever that could play out in that team environment, whatever the themes are that could come out of that, what can we actually achieve realistically? What can we set our eyes on? And then how? Like, what would the behaviors be of that? How would we go about that? So how would our trainings need to be different? Or how would we need to show up at training? Right?
Yeah.
What energy are we going to bring to that every training session that we give you? And we understand that we might have down moments and high moments. How do we need to be in the moments that's good on the field? How do we need to be in the moments that things are not going so great, right? How do we have to be at press conferences and walk from the bus to the change room where people are seeing us? Like, I think I would spend a bit of time unpacking that part too, so that we're not just having a philosophical idea or an energy that we can tap into, but we understand how that energy will look.
Yeah. And I think
then possibly not make that too restrictive, because what can happen, and I've been in team environments where we've gone through that exercise, and it was a big learning for me at the time, was we almost like created team rules, and then whenever somebody broke the rule, they would be like wrapped on the hands and hey, and I don't know if that was always that effective, versus the idea you just shared around contracting, where it's okay, cool, yes, this energy. And yes, there might be the team non-negotiables, and there should, for me, normally not be too many of those, maybe the team non-negotiables around that energy, so that as a team, we know we're doing this as a team. However, spend a bit of time unpacking with each individual the how for them. Okay, there's this energy and there's these couple of things from the team that we've all committed to. How would that be for you? How does that play out for you, through your day? How would you walk as an individual if you were showing that? How would you talk if you were showing that? That would be sort of what I think I would just maybe make sure to add on to that, or into that in some way, shape, or form. I have one thought though, just before you go. I see that you've got some things to add there.
Yeah.
In South Africa, and I don't know what your sense is about this, at times, not with all teams, but there is an aversion to a conversation. All right. There's an aversion at times to getting into a room, having a planned or structured conversation to say, right, we've got to move the needle here as a team. There's more of this thinking of it's about bat and ball. Let me go hit balls rather, and that was just a thought I wanted to throw out there.
You're actually hitting the nail on the head what I was actually going to say as well.
Okay, so I'm sorry for preempting you.
No, it's fine. It's all good. I think the first part, what you were referring to in terms of actions and behaviors and things like that, for me, there's a nice way to phrase this as boundaries for action. So the action plans and the performances that we hit, and all of that, the standards we set for ourselves, that's kind of like the boundaries for action type of dynamic. The only thing about that is, as you said earlier about the rules and little rules as possible, all those sorts of things, is that it needs to be an open document, a living document, like social agreement that's kind of walked out. So it's not fully scripted out, scripted, but not fully. It's like loose, and it's a living thing. It's alive. So because we are alive and we're constantly evolving and whatever, we constantly re-look at it and rehash it. So what's nice is if you have a set tournament like this, which is a month long, that living document is only existing for that period of time. It's almost like tournament rules, the complete opposite, the more constructive.
The playing conditions.
Yeah, essentially. So, but it's also another way of saying, like, when what happened in a positive way, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. But I'm saying in a very positive way. What happens here in America when they're at the World Cup, what happens in these performance environments stays here, which simply means we're going to give it our best shot and give everything that we know about performances into this, and we'll live it out for this period. And then we can go take a break to kind of half enjoy what we did there, right? So that living document can cease for that time period, because we're going to throw so much energy into it that's going to have to stop. You know what I mean? You're so fully invested into it. That's when it becomes really the juice of it. As opposed to something that's just scripted up, and then you want to copy paste it for everything else. It's too much. There's too much sacredness in it for you to do something like that, right? The other one was I think this is the second one you were speaking about right now. It needs to be a continuous. So there's an aversion, definitely, but there needs to be a transparency and a vulnerability for a continuous conversation. So it's not that we just sat down for whatever and we spoke about these things in a room or whatever, team room, change room, whatever. But as we're going across it, we're actually highlighting it on the go, on the fly. So as the behavior is noticed, someone will nudge and say, and then bring it up later again in a more corporate setting and saying, yeah, remember this incident or remember that. So it becomes reinforced collectively through conversation that's continuing. And that's why I'm saying it's part of that living arrangement. It's almost, remember, documents can be formalized verbally or written. We can have it like, just because I'm saying it here now, it's like a verbal agreement just as much as I would write it down. I know it's two formats, but it's the same sort of thing. So if we speak to each other in a certain way, we are setting that contract into motion, this boundaries for action into motion, and we're becoming this living examples of these champion personas that we want to be or expressing. So that and then to top it all of lastly, and we probably could have said this at the beginning of our session when we started this, right? Because it also applies to this. Anything like talk is not cheap. Talk is expensive. I always used to refer to that. It breaks through industry. Because I mean, if I share quality thought and it creates an epiphany for you, it creates a shifting in your mentality. It creates things. So talk is things, right? It's physical stuff. That's why people say I'm gonna steal that idea, because they see it as valuable. It creates and it creates energy. But the nice thing about when people come from a particular frame of mind, when you talk about that teachability or that learning, right? You're not necessarily where people say you need to speak in such a way so that you can be understood. That is true. However, there's also the talking, which I'm talking about now with these conversations, talking enough continuously so that you yourself can understand. So you yourself can get that epiphany. You understand? Not just to be understood by others, but you walk this journey together, and in conversation, understanding comes for both parties. And when understanding comes, you can stand under that truth. When that truth comes, epiphany, that's the truth that you can stand under collectively. And that's what you walk away with. That's the number one win. And that's when you're making these type of conversations invaluable, actually, because you wouldn't be able to get it any other way other than engaging like this. What a tour this was, because all of this gems and pearls that's come out of it, and I walk away a victor and the cup to boot. The cup is just a confirmation of the victor that I always was.
Yes. Russell, I think that's a great place to wrap today's conversation, right? I think I've certainly enjoyed this conversation. I think we're getting into a little bit more of the nitty-gritty.
Yeah.
Just I hope people that followed us to here, please share, like, comment. We want to hear from you. We want to hear your voice. And as much as we're listening to each other and listening to ourselves, we want to just encourage this conversation to spread, right? I've certainly had some people from all around the world reach out to me. I think you alluded to that same thing just before we started sort of the official recording of this conversation. And so I just want to keep encouraging people. Like, if you find any gem inside of this, share it with somebody else. And just because you got that gem doesn't mean that they won't get something different. So please let people know what we're busy with here. And we're going to keep doing this for the next month, at least, if not beyond that. I've certainly enjoyed these conversations. I'm happy to keep having them. That's it. That's it from me. Russell, I don't know if there's anything else from you for today.
No, I'm happy to leave it at that. Thanks very much, Jody. It was a great conversation. I think now that we get into the tournament itself, we might be able to talk more cricket directly as we watch games unfold before us. Yeah.
Brilliant. See you next time.
Cheers, man.
Cool.